Welcome to the NP POW Videocast, a space where I am going to talk to nurse practitioner experts who will share their pearls of wisdom, or what we like to call POWs, on an array of healthcare topics. I'm your host, Dr. Julia Rogers, a certified nurse practitioner. And today we are honored to have Dr. Susanne Phillips to discuss nurse practitioner education. It's an honor to have you on the POW Videocast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to chat with you about nurse practitioner education.
Can you first just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role in academia, and why this topic is so important to you?
Certainly. I'm currently the Senior Associate Dean and Professor at the UC Irvine's Sue and Bill Gross School of Nursing. And that's where I started my academic journey in 1998, long before there was a School of Nursing at UCI. I've served as a DNP and FNP program director, a clinical coordinator for NP students, director of the pre-licensure program, among other leadership positions. But nurse practitioner education is part of who I am as a nurse. I began teaching in 1998, and I've continued to do so throughout my career. I worked as an FNP clinically, precepting students for about 23 years in private practice, academic practice, and federally qualified health centers. It wasn't that long ago that NP education was not standardized in the country, and I've been part of that progression as well since the accreditation process for nurse practitioner programs, as well as our DNP program. High quality, high touch education is immensely important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's only getting better as time goes on. So I know it's a really big decision to return to graduate school and then start the journey to become a nurse practitioner. So can you share with us your journey and how you went through graduate school and then eventually obtaining your doctoral degree in nursing practice?
Certainly. So my journey began, my nursing journey began at the end of high school. I was actually interested in medicine and applied to UC Irvine here in California to complete a major in biological sciences. But the summer after I graduated, I actually worked as a medical assistant in an internal medicine practice and decided that was not the trajectory I wanted my life to take. I had seen a nurse practitioner from my healthcare, and I fell in love with nursing. Understanding that UCI didn't have a nursing program to apply to, I declined my application at UCI and enrolled in a local community college with the intention of transferring to California State University, Long Beach for my bachelor's degree. On my way, I obtained an EMT license and served as the first female ambulance attendant in Orange County, and I worked my way through nursing school, eventually ending up in the emergency department. But understanding that graduate school is where I was headed, I set my sights on emergency nursing. I practiced for 3 years before I entered graduate school to obtain my master's degree in nursing and my family nurse practitioner certificate. Got married, had my first child in graduate school, what many of my former students have done, and graduated working in a community health center in Laguna Beach. My clinical background included full scope family practice with obstetrics and pediatrics, which gave rise to my curiosity in nursing education. Like many of us in nursing education, I began teaching in a postgraduate family nurse practitioner program in the UC Irvine School of Medicine. This was back in 1998, long before we had the nursing school. And so nurses entered as master's prepared nurses, and then we provided them with the family nurse practitioner certificate and clinical training. So as that program grew, so did my role in education and certainly in academic leadership. The doctor of nursing practice degree was started, and this was in the early 2000s, and I had some colleagues that were certainly early adopters with Case Western graduates. It wasn't until 2011 when I received an email announcement from Yale School of Nursing stating that they were opening a postgraduate DNP program with a concentration in health policy and leadership. I knew that was for me. I was a nurse practitioner. I had worked in health policy, advocating for nurse practitioners. And so that's where I went. It was a hybrid program, brand new to Yale, and completed my degree in 2015. Why did I pick Yale? It spoke to my interest in health policy, honestly. But also, I born and raised here in California, educated in California, and I wanted to get some experience on the East Coast. With that, I graduated and I continued to teach and I continued to practice, clinically practice, and it's brought me to where I am today.
What a journey. And I agree with you. I think sometimes we think we're always going to stay maybe in one city or one state with our education, but then it just depends on what you want to study. So then
Mhm.
sometimes we do hybrid or we even move to go somewhere. So it's interesting to see how your journey kind of shaped where you are and where you went.
Yeah.
So now let's dive into some questions that I'm sure everyone is waiting to hear the
Yeah.
answers to. Um, what have you found as the most rewarding aspect of someone that is advancing their education?
I have to say the most rewarding about advancing my education are the connections that I continue to make within nursing and certainly outside of the nursing profession that impact my teaching and seeing hundreds of students take up nurse practitioner leadership and advocacy positions as a result of my mentoring. That's probably the most rewarding.
I agree. I think there's so much growth that happens as you continue your education throughout. What advice do you have for nurses that are just deciding whether or not they should return to graduate school to become a nurse practitioner? And then what kind of questions should they be asking themselves?
Great question. Well, first, you need to be honest with yourself whether it's the right time for you to devote all your time to this type of endeavor. Graduate school is no joke. It is not like undergraduate education. Not that that is a joke at all, but it is very, very different. You're expected to be a self-starter, a self-learner, resilient, humble, and available and dedicated to take on this new venture. Too often I encounter students who think that they can work full time as a nurse because, I only work 3 12-hour shifts, um, manage their family, have children, support their parents and sometimes siblings, and manage their home. Um, Honestly, there aren't other health profession students out there that say, "Hey, I'm starting fill in the blank school. I think I'll keep my full-time job. I've got
Mhm.
plenty of time." Becoming a nurse practitioner is just as rigorous of a process as any of the other health professions, and you need to understand the amount of time it will take to be successful in graduate school.
I agree with you. I think that is the best advice
Mhm.
anyone can throw out there because I do find also as an educator that many times they want to work full time, take care of their family full time, and then sometimes school kind of gets pushed to the side. And so
Mhm.
they struggle just a little bit with that.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
Can you just talk a
Um,
little bit about how to determine what school would be the best fit for someone, just as you talked about how you chose Yale?
sure, sure, sure. So in terms of finding the right school fit, there's some things that you really need to be thinking about, and it really is dependent on your sort of your family situation. Um, you have to think about, do I have the time, or can I cut down on something to create time that's necessary for school? You certainly have to think about whether a traditional on-site program, hybrid program, or an online program is for you. Um, Note that regardless of how how the didactic courses or the courses that you learn your theory stuff in are offered, you'll always need to complete your clinical training in person in a healthcare setting. That seems to be obvious, but sometimes
Mhm.
applicants don't understand that. Consider whether you've got time to attend synchronous classes, or are you looking for a completely asynchronous program? I do caution those that are considering programs that do not have some sort of synchronous time together for some components of their program. And by that, I mean that there are programs in which you enroll and there's likely an orientation, and then you are on your own to complete the coursework without scheduled weekly or biweekly in-person online requirements. These programs do have faculty who are available to students and manage the online asynchronous classes, but other than electronic means of communicating like discussion board, chat, and that kind of thing, there's little face-to-face instruction. Nurse practitioner education is very complex. It's difficult to navigate the expectations and the subtleties alone. Now, I'm not indicating that online asynchronous learning isn't rigorous or challenging. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
there are highly reputable schools of nursing who offer this type of program. But in my experience, there are select students who need times where face-to-face or synchronous learning is offered. Something else I was thinking about was make sure to completely review the school's website and consider what services are available to the students. Consider the faculty's expertise and experience. Take a look at the curriculum. Ensure that they are accredited, fully accredited, and certainly schedule time to speak with a student affairs representative that can answer your questions. Oftentimes, they have informational sessions that you can attend online.
Yeah, that's another really great point because I think you can determine a lot by just going on a school's website and kind of filtering through, especially when you're looking at your doctorate, because
Mhm.
then you can align yourself with somebody that has the same interest as you do as
Exactly.
well.
Mhm.
So, speaking of doctoral and master's programs, can you just share with our audience the similarities and the differences in obtaining a master's degree as a nurse practitioner versus a doctorate degree, and
Mhm.
talk about how long each take, and then what are the opportunities, or are they similar or different for a doctoral or a master's degree prepared nurse?
Oh, sure, sure. So, and this is a multi-part question, and there are a lot of complexities to it. But first, understand there are many ways to become a nurse practitioner. So it's going to really depend on your existing educational status. Um, as I said, there are many ways. The first way to enroll into a master's degree nurse practitioner program is as a bachelor's prepared registered nurse. The completion time for those programs are typically 18 to 24 months, depending on how the coursework is spaced out. If you have a bachelor's in nursing and enroll in a DNP nurse practitioner program, that usually takes 3 to 4 years, again, depending on full-time or part-time status, as well as how the coursework and clinical training are spaced out. So there are going to be some differences. Um, the the core content is very much regulated by our accreditation bodies. So if you go to an accredited program, you're going to have all the same core content. It
Hmm.
just really depends on how they've spaced their programs.
Hmm.
If you have a bachelor's degree another field, there are programs who will enroll you and provide the RN education training and then immediately matriculate you into an NP program, whether that's a master's or a DNP program. It's really important to ask specific questions about the length of the program from start to graduation. Traditional universities and colleges may take breaks between semesters and during the summers, while others only have a few days between their semesters or quarters. So that will really impact the amount of time that it takes.
Hmm.
So it really is highly dependent on the program you're looking for. In terms of opportunities for each, are they different? Are they similar? This is a really good question. Although most nurse practitioner programs have moved or are in the process of moving their traditional master's NP programs to DNP NP programs, there are still opportunities to enroll in master's programs across the nation. The programs are similar in terms of their clinical nurse practitioner training, but differ in the coursework required for the degree. So understanding that the nurse practitioner is a role and we're training you and educating you to be a nurse practitioner. And then the degree requirements, whether that's a master's or a doctorate, will be different depending on the type of program you're in. The accrediting bodies, as well as national specialty exam companies, require a minimum of 500 to 750 hours of clinical nurse practitioner training, regardless of the degree program. However, there are additional hours of clinical practicum types of experiences required to complete a DNP program or a DNP degree, excuse me. And these include, but are highly dependent on the program. They sometimes require practicum hours in health policy, in leadership, and social determinants of health, quality improvement, research methods, other things like that.
Hmm.
So those are some differences between the two.
Yeah, and with the DNP, right, they also have to have time to do their clinical project, their
Right.
evidence-based practice project as well.
Exactly. And that's part of those extra hours that they complete.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do you find is the most challenging for your students that are coming in to be a nurse practitioner?
So I find the most challenging for nurse practitioner students is the rigor of the program and the priority of clinical training. Most nurses come to graduate school as experts in their field of nursing. They've worked many hours, had many hours of clinical care experience. Oftentimes, they're highly certified. They've been in management roles and leadership roles. Um, but beyond the personal challenges of scheduling, finances, life outside of school, many are not prepared for the study required, the amount of writing that's required, the amount of time spent on collaborative work. Clinical preceptors in ambulatory sites, if you're in a family nurse practitioner program or a primary care nurse practitioner program, they're only available during the week and during traditional work hours. There's some opportunities for weekend placement, but this is very dependent upon the specialty that's been chosen. And you will be asked to clear your schedule for clinical rotations during traditional work hours. If you're looking for an acute care program, obviously those are typically in acute care centers where there's 24/7 hour
Mhm.
availability.
I agree. Sometimes I think it is more difficult to juggle because as a bachelor student, you do go to clinical, but it's vastly different
Hmm.
how you do that in comparison to when you want to become an NP.
Right,
So
right.
you touched on this a little bit earlier, but more specifically, advice for someone when they're making that decision, is right now the right time? So what kind of advice would you give to them about thinking about, is it the right time or
Hmm.
not?
Hmm. Really, really important. So, considering the points that I've made previously, it's important to sit down with your significant other, family members, children if they're older, discuss the impact your program will have on how the family is functioning now if you're in that situation. If you're single, you certainly need to have these conversations because your social life will certainly change. But it's important to discuss that life events will continue to occur. Children will continue to become more busy with school and activities. Parents will age and need attention. Relationships need attending to. Uh,
Mhm.
there are things that occur, such as weddings, pregnancy, separations, death. These things all occur in graduate school. And you certainly can't possibly plan for all of these events, but have an awareness that they may be in the mix of your family, work, and school responsibilities. Um, that's not to dissuade anybody from making their decision, but it's important that you have an awareness that all of that stuff continues to happen. And is this the right time for you?
And because I think there is a lot more work, coursework and just
Mhm.
reading and like you said, writing. And so a lot of that cannot be procrastinated on until the
Right.
last minute. And then if you have a life event, it's very difficult then to try to catch up because there's so much coming
Hmm.
rather quickly, actually.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, I know you touched on a couple of these things, but I'm going to try to pull them together a little
Sure.
bit. So, thinking about you had said the hours that are already required, but talking about you mentioned didactic, then clinical time, and then there's
Mhm.
face to face, there's
Mhm.
asynchronous, there's synchronous, there's hybrid. Can you kind of
Yes.
separate those programs and just kind of tell everyone which is which and how they could choose which one best suits them?
Sure. Sure. Um, okay, I'll start with synchronous programs. Synchronous programs can be either traditional in-person going to school, going to a physical facility, or they can be online. But that means there's a scheduled time for you to be in class together. There's, requirements for pre-work, there's requirements for group work, but you all come together face to face in some modality at some point during the week, and you're required to participate and do the activities that are required for that particular day. This may occur all on one day. It may occur in certain, so many evenings a week. each program is different. If you go to a program that requires you to be on campus, you need to be on campus. And that means you've got to think about your work schedule. You've got to think about childcare. You've got to think about all of those things because you're expected to be there. I mentioned asynchronous programs. Asynchronous programs are programs that all of the content, you have a faculty for a course, the content is online, you complete the content. Oftentimes there's group work that you have to do, you have to coordinate yourself or with the other group members. You upload videos, you upload talks and presentations, discussion boards certainly, and all that work is done at your pace when you have the time to do it. So of course there's a deadline to submit it, but you get to decide when during the week are you going to work on that, whether it's going to be the mornings or the afternoons, the middle of the night, whatever works for you. Like I mentioned earlier, the asynchronous programs oftentimes have a few times that you have to come together to, for orientation, certainly for graduation, or doing your proposal defense and your project presentations and those types of things. And then some programs are hybrid, and that I teach in a program that's hybrid. And how that looks is we've got 3 intensives sort of bookending and one in the middle for our students where they have to come together for a certain number of days. The courses, the in between the courses are online that have asynchronous components and synchronous components. And then certainly they have their clinical time where they have to go to their preceptor site or the healthcare site and complete those clinical hours. So there's a lot of opportunity, and there are a lot of different types of programs that fit different types of learners. So it's really, really important to look at all the different kinds of programs and decide, am I someone that really needs to have that face-to-face time? And I won't say in asynchronous programs you won't have face-to-face time. There's certainly faculty that are available to you that you can speak with, real time. But it's just it's a very different type of mentorship and learning. So
I agree.
decide whether you're completely a self-starter and a self-learner, or you really need some of the support of the group type of things.
And whether or not you need also the support of things that are possibly just on campus. And so sometimes, you need a writing center. And so really determining if that is accessible online as well, or if it's just something that is for the students that are on campus.
Exactly.
What is your advice for someone that wants to continue work? I know that you alluded to this earlier, but is there a sweet spot? Should they continue to work? How much should they be working? What's the best?
So that's a great question. So let's just pretend that you have all of the options available to you and you have all the financial support available to you. I would say, if you can work per diem and you can schedule the times when you want to work, that's helpful. I would say to those that need to work full time, because maybe you're the sole breadwinner in the family, the sole support, you're going to really need to consider the timing of the program and your life and your family's lives. And I say that because most of us nurses are typically type A, and we really think we can do it all because we handle multiple things at a time. But as was mentioned previously, this is really something that you have to dedicate a lot of time to. So I don't want to pretend that working full time is an easy thing to do, that you can manage it. I would certainly recommend going part-time if that's feasible. And if you could go per diem or not work, of course, that's, even better for you in terms of timing and amount of time to learn and those types of things. So usually when students ask me this, or potential students ask me this, I sit down with them and I say, well, it's really important for me to know your life and what's important to you, and what responsibilities you have that are, no go. I can't, this is my hard stop. Then you're going to have to find different programs that might cater to that real independent learning. You do it on your own, you do it at your own pace. Those might work better.
I've gotten with my students and had them fill out a spreadsheet, and I
Mm,
say, write out every hour of the day that you're awake and then put in the things that you are not willing to negotiate, like
yes,
family time, going to church, whatever that may be,
whatever that
and
is.
put that in that schedule. And then think about what time your classes are, if it's
Mm,
face to face, or where are you going to spend the time looking at that class? And then count on 3 hours for every credit hour outside of that
yes,
time to
that's
do
exactly
other
right.
work. And I
Mhm.
said, can you do it? Because if you can't, you have to figure out then which priority may not necessarily be your priority any longer. And that's how you
Exactly.
can decide if you have enough time or not.
Yes, and I think that yeah, I missed saying it, but that point is so important. Gr- Nurses who are going into graduate school need to understand that the what we call seat time is 1 hour for every credit. So if you're in three-unit courses, you've got 9 hours of seat time, which is equivalent to the time you would actually be sitting in a seat doing the face-to-face classwork stuff. And then you have 3 hours of study time for each credit for that particular course that's required. So you have that 3 hour block, but you have 9 hours of study for all the content in that particular class. You've got three of those classes, you've got 36 hours a week that you're tied up,
Mhm.
and that's just to be successful.
And what I have found is that students who choose online, which is great, I do think that that works for several
Mhm.
people. So I'm not knocking that in any way, but
No.
they feel like they lose the seat time. So then
Mhm.
it's a little bit faster or easier, but it is not. You still have the same amount of hours, even though you're really not sitting in a seat.
Right. Right. That's not easy.
Now,
That's not easy to think about because I've just never had to think about that before.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Now about preceptors. So you said there's all this clinical time that you have to do. So talk a little bit about finding preceptors, how
Mm.
that looks and how that looks for students now, and how you can kind of see maybe that shifting in the future.
Oh, this is such an important topic, and I think at every nurse practitioner faculty meeting we all go to, this is just a hot topic because finding preceptors for quality nurse practitioner educate training, the clinical training is not easy. Not easy to find. Now, some programs will require that, especially if it's distance. Let's say you live in California, but you're going to a program that's based in Pennsylvania, you're going to have to find preceptors in your area that are
Mhm.
willing to take you so that you can complete those clinical hours. Now, that's not to say that the school in Pennsylvania won't coordinate that with you. They certainly have to have legal agreements and those types
Mhm.
of things. So there will be some school involvement, but the school might not know about all of the preceptors in your area. So consider whether you have to be in sort of the driver's seat in terms of the preceptors that you find. And I'll mention this about programs that require you to find a preceptor, or one or all or whatever is required.
Mhm.
you you'll need to ask, what types of experiences do you need to have to demonstrate competency in that
Mhm.
specific specialty. So if you're going to a family nurse practitioner program, you're going to need a family practice, a practice that sees all ages and all types of problems, issues, health maintenance. You'll need a specific pediatric rotation so that you can just focus on those kids. You'll need a specific OB rotation so
Yep.
you can learn how to manage health issues in pregnancy and manage that pregnancy through delivery. You'll need to have a placement in that is in caring for older adults. So you can't just say, okay, I'm going to go to this one internal medicine practice and I'm going to do all my hours there, because you just simply won't get the experiences that you need. Now, if you're in an acute care program and you work in a hospital, and the school out of state school contracts with your hospital to allow you to do your rotations there, perhaps all of your rotations can happen in that acute care setting, because that's what you're learning. But in primary care specialties, you're going to need to have multiple different experiences,
Mhm.
and they can't all be in one place.
I agree, because just like you said, one of the reasons why you chose a different school right across the country is to get that experience. And I find that students who go with different preceptors, they learn many different things from each one in
Mhm,
order to form their own type of practice. So
mhm.
what works for best for them, and if you only follow one, you only know one way to go. And so you
Right.
get a lot more experience by
Mhm.
following others too.
Mhm. The other thing I'd mention is that you want to make sure you have experiences in different types of health settings, and by that I mean you want to make sure you have experiences in a community site, whether that's a federally qualified health center or a community clinic or something like that, some place that serves the underserved population. That is very different from a private practice that serves, your PPO patients and or your HMO
Mhm.
patients. You need to have that variety, because you need to learn how to take care of people under different circumstances and different payers and those types of things.
Very great point. I do think that that is important also, because even if you work in one
Mhm,
practice, sometimes you just have patients of many different areas that
mhm,
come in, and so you can take what you learn from all of that and apply
mhm,
it to one practice.
mhm,
So now moving a little bit to, I think, growing in a leadership position as a nurse
mhm,
practitioner. So, what do you think about students becoming involved in professional organizations
mhm.
or advocating for policy change? I know sometimes students are timid, but what's your advice about starting as a student?
So this is a great question for me, because my expertise is health policy and advocacy. I've been a nurse practitioner advocate for my entire career. So part of my program, and the program that we've developed at UC Irvine, requires that students become active in a professional association in terms of advocacy. Many of our courses weave that component through requirements for learning about that throughout that particular course, whether it's the social determinants of health course, or whether it's the health policy course, or the clinical courses. We do require that students have a number of different opportunities for learning patient advocacy. In terms of leadership, same thing. If you're in a DMP program, you're going to have some sort of leadership course, whether
Mhm.
it's integrated with a health policy sometimes, or whatever. You're going to need some of that leadership experience. So although students do come in, especially bachelor's of nursing students, come in with some of that management experience because they've been a charge nurse, they've been a unit director, it's important that they have some sort of leadership experience, not only just in their group work that they do, but leading a team. And
Mhm.
oftentimes that's their DMP project, where they have to lead this
Mhm.
interdisciplinary team of members to get that project done. So absolutely, I require them to experience a professional organization conference or meeting. I ask them to visit their legislators. We have legislators come in and talk to them. We talk about various types of advocacy. I ask them to, what is your passion? What is your passion? What issue is your passion? And then let's find the
Mhm.
advocacy opportunities for you to go and learn and grow and perhaps be in leadership in those types of organizations.
And I think it's important for students to understand that we weren't always where we are today. It
Mm-hmm.
took a path that others were kind of forging through in
Mm-hmm.
order for it to be where it is. And And we need to still expand on that. So if no one becomes involved in organizations or policy, we really become stagnant. And so we
Yes.
need that in order to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And a measure for an individual nurse practitioner or education program is how involved are your graduates in the local or regional NP group or even state.
Mhm.
Tracking that is important because oftentimes you'll find if you have a heavy emphasis of that in your program, you'll find that those students go out and they become the next leaders.
Yes, I agree. So we talked about that, and now let's move on to educators. So what
Yes.
advice do you have for nurse practitioners that would like to begin a career as a nurse practitioner educator?
Yes, I love this question, and I talk to so many students about this. When you first graduate as a nurse practitioner, the learning curve is about 90 degrees, right? So it takes some time to get to settle into your clinical practice.
Mhm.
But once you settled into that clinical practice, I encourage everybody to go back to their programs and say, hey, I really enjoy acute common conditions. I'd love to do a guest lecture for you on whatever it is that you're really interested in. Um, I imagine most every faculty member would say, I'd love for you to do a guest lecture in my
Yes,
class.
I agree.
Yes, and they'll mentor you as well,
Mhm.
especially if you show a lot of interest. So certainly do that. Do take the opportunity to guest lecture. See if that's for you. Taking on a whole course is a whole other skill set that you haven't necessarily learned because you became a nurse practitioner. So if you're really interested in going into nurse practitioner education and you kind of know that from the beginning, you might want to choose a program that has some nursing education courses within their nurse practitioner program or their
Mhm.
DNP program or their master's program, where they actually teach you pedagogy and curriculum development and some of those things. Even the lingo is
Mhm.
brand new. So if you think you might want to be an educator, you might want to look for that in your original NP program. You certainly can go back and do postgraduate certificates, but
Mhm.
it might be helpful to look for in an NP program.
I agree. I had been a nurse practitioner for 15 years before I decided to go into education. And I thought, I've been an NP for a long time. This should be okay. But you are right. You learn like you become a novice again because you have to understand pedagogy and you have to understand all of Bloom's taxonomy. And I was like,
Right.
oh my goodness, there's a lot.
Yes, there's so much.
So, in your last few minutes, could you please provide just one or two POWs or pearls of wisdom to our listeners
Mhm.
that you have found when talking to prospective students about becoming an NP?
Sure. So my first POW is take a considerable amount of time to consider what nurse practitioner specialty you would like to enroll in. I say that because oftentimes nurses get recruited into a program that maybe one of their friends was in that they want to share that, or they want to share that experience with. You really have to spend some time investigating what types of patients that particular specialty sees, and what types of experiences you're going to need. If you know that you do not do pediatrics, certainly you're not going to enroll in a pediatric nurse practitioner program, but be very careful about a family nurse practitioner program because we are going to expect you to show competency and even interest in seeing pediatric
Hmm.
patients
Yes.
as a family nurse practitioner. If you really know that's not your jam, you don't want to do that, then consider an adult geriatric primary care NP role or an adult geriatric acute or type of specialty. I think all too often people go, I'm going to go into a family program because I'll just get a little bit of everything and then I can decide where I want to go. You're spending time learning and having experiences and things that you really don't want to do. OB is another one. If you really don't like OB, family nurse practitioner, certainly women's health nurse practitioner might not be the place for you. Look at the adult geriatric. GYN is going to be part of all of it, but those two particular specialties you need to be careful, or you need to be thinking about. Another thing that I find, especially because I teach in a family nurse practitioner program, is that nurses will select a family nurse practitioner program really knowing that they really want to work in the hospital when they're done. And throughout their program, they have physicians and other nurse practitioners, kind of pulling at them saying, okay, when you graduate, we want you to work here. We want you to work in this hospitalist role, or we want you to be intensivist because you've been an ICU nurse practitioner or an ICU nurse. We don't prepare you for that. That's not the type of program you should spend your money on. Spend your money on an acute care nurse practitioner program. They will train you to do just that. Now, my last thing to say about that is certainly we might go into a nurse practitioner program and practice for some time in that specialty and then decide, psychiatric nursing is really where I'm finding my pull. And then you can go back and do a postmaster's certificate or postgraduate certificate in that particular nurse practitioner specialty. You can even do that as a family nurse practitioner into acute care. But please don't think you're going to be a primary care nurse practitioner matriculating right into an acute care role, or an acute care nurse practitioner matriculating into a primary care role, because it's just not how you're trained. So that's the first POW I have for you. The second one is take some time, and we haven't really talked about this at all because we're talking specifically about nurse practitioners. Take some time to consider what APRN role is best suited for your future career goals. By that, I mean, we're talking about nurse practitioners. We assume that people that want to go to nurse practitioner school want to become nurse practitioners, but sometimes they get into it and they're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted to do at all. I really don't want to do this. And I've spent a lot of time, I've committed a lot of money and energy, and I got to see this through. But really what I wanted to do is I wanted to be a clinical nurse specialist because I really love diabetes. I really want to specialize in that area. Or I'd like to become a CRNA. And I didn't think about it before, but really I want to become a CRNA. So think about, take time to consider what role is best suited for your career goals, your future career goals. And then I guess that's the same thing with the degree program that you select, whether it's a master's or a doctoral degree. So those are my two POWs.
They're great POWs. So thank you for bringing that up, because yes, we talk about nurse practitioners only because it's, part of the Nurse Practitioner Journal podcast. But I agree with you. There is such a vast array of things now that people can go into as far as NP, or as you mentioned, CNS, or nurse anesthetist. And so I think people really do just need to take a minute and breathe and figure out what it is they really, really have a passion for.
Yes. I say that exact same thing. Take some time to breathe.
So it really has been a pleasure listening to all the wonderful advice that you gave to our listeners about nurse practitioner education. And I'm positive that all of them have a little more insight and can feel more confident when making a decision to go back to school and become an NP or another APRN. So thanks for sharing your time, knowledge, and POWs with us today, Dr. Phillips, on the NP POW Videocast.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank our viewers and hope that you'll come back to hear more pearls of wisdom from our NP experts in the future. Until then, this is Julia Rogers wishing you joy today and every day.